my intention is to give you a brief overview of the whole status of freshwater fish invasions in India, and also come up with a few discussion points for the plenary or the panel discussions, and also the other short discussions that we have between sessions. When you compare the three big realms, marine, freshwater, and terrestrial, it's always freshwater that gets the least amount of attention from all stakeholders, whether it is from researchers, policymakers, politicians, all of those different sectors. But then when you look at the intensity of threat or the scale of threats, and you compare these between these three realms, you always find that freshwater ecosystems and biodiversity are the most threatened when you compare to marine and terrestrial systems. So this is from the Living Planet Index report that comes out every 2 years, published by the WWF. So a month and a half ago, freshwater experts from around the world, including myself, published this paper in Nature for the first time, where we looked at the entire freshwater fauna of the world and trying to understand the extinction risk and conservation status based on the IUCN Red List. So what we found was that almost 25% of all freshwater fauna around the world are threatened with extinction. So it varies between different groups, fish, odonates, decapod crustaceans, all of that. But generally, the level of threat is between 20 and 25% of threat for different groups. And you can see where India is. So it's not a good story as far as India is concerned, because India is one of the regions where you have the maximum number of threatened freshwater organisms from a range of groups, just not fish, but also odonates, mollusk, crustaceans, aquatic plants, all of those groups. And when you look at alien species as a major threat for freshwater fauna, so currently we have more than 1,000 freshwater fish for which alien species invasion is one of the major threats. So it can be a threat just individually or in combination with other threats. So for more than 1,000 species, you have alien species invasion as a major threat. And alien species have also resulted in freshwater extinctions. So it's just not terrestrial or marine extinctions, but also in freshwater world, we have lots of examples of freshwater fish becoming extinct as a result of alien invasive species. The most classical example is this group of carps. Around 15 species of carps went extinct from a single lake in the Philippines because of introduction of a food fish into the system. And even from an economic point of view, aquatic invasions have cost a lot of money for different countries of the world. So there are different estimations, but around 345 billion is what has cost the world for managing aquatic invasions alone. And if you look into the other sectors, terrestrial, marine, so that figure goes up. And this is an interesting paper where they've compared the cost of aquatic invasions to different other things. So one is, for example, the comparison between managing aquatic invasions and managing global marine protected areas. So it says that it's much higher than actually having a lot of global marine protected areas. And just for one species alone, the red-eared slider turtle eradication program in Queensland in Australia. And that is a comparison between how much money has been spent for the invasion in comparison to GDP of a country like Switzerland and 10 times the GDP of a country like Sri Lanka. So that shows you how expensive or costly it is to manage invasions. So when you look at global freshwater fish invasions, so the darker areas that you see on the map is where any river basin can have anywhere between 25 to 95% of alien species. So again, India is not doing quite good there. So you have Central India, Western Ghats, the Northern Indian region, where you have anywhere between 25 to 95% of the fish that you find in these rivers are non-native species. So it's the same way in North America, parts of Australia, South America, Central Asia, etc. And when you look at tropical Asia, so that's one of the major regions, you can find that almost 62% of river basins have non-native species. So it's almost more than half of all rivers that you find in tropical Asia have one or more number of non-native fish species. And the figure down there is, again, the percentage of river basins where you have species that have colonized, non-native species that have colonized these river basins. So anywhere you go in tropical Asia, you find either half or more number of non-native species in a single river. And it's just a handful of species. So it's not that there are lots of species creating problems, but it's just 20 or 25 species that are creating an issue in most of these rivers. So there's a list of fish that have been considered to be the most important alien species in tropical Asian rivers. And it's always the same species that keep repeating in different rivers. So it's not that there are different species in different rivers. So there's around 20 or 25 species that keep occurring in every major river of tropical Asia. And there are lots of pathways, sources and pathways of freshwater invasion. So that's here. So it comes from the aquaculture industry, it comes from the pet industry, from biological control, for example, mosquito control, which I'll talk about in detail a few slides after this. And there's also stocking for fisheries. So there's a range of sources, a range of pathways. And studies have shown that these pathways or sources will keep increasing in the years to come. So these are pathways which have to be controlled, which have to be managed. Otherwise, these pathways will be responsible for more invasions in the future. So this is just an introduction, and I'll just go into what challenges we face from an Indian perspective, looking at alien invasions. So we have around 600 plus non-native or alien species in the country at present. And it's a very huge diversity because India has around 1,200 native species. So when you add 600 non-native, it's almost half of what we have in the country are non-native species. And four major pathways. One is the aquarium trade, the pet trade, then aquaculture, fish being brought in for food, fish that have been used for mosquito control, and then also for recreation or sport fishing. So these are the four major pathways through which you have alien species entering the country. So there are lots of visitors who came in 150, 160 years ago who have never left the country, but we also have more number of uninvited guests coming in through different sources. So we have records for some species when they came in or when they were introduced to the country, but there are also species for which we don't really have an exact year as to when they entered the country or when people started to see them in our rivers. And the extent of spread, so it's all over the country. It's just not certain regions that have these species. They're right there from Kashmir to Kerala, from Manipur to Rajasthan. So it's all over the place, and it has sort of colonized every possible habitat that you see. So it's there in high altitude lakes. It's there in fast flowing streams, wetlands, swamps, rivers. Wherever aquatic habitats are there, you find one or the other alien species. And this is a study that we carried out in Kerala. So you can see in a small state like Kerala, the intensity of spread of alien species. So they're everywhere. So the map on the left is species that have been used for the aquaculture or the food industry. And the map on the right is the ornamental species. So whichever species or whichever group you take, they're all over the state. So, you have a rampant spread of alien species right from, south to the north, east to the west, everywhere in the mountains, in the lowland areas. And as I said, every possible habitats that you see, you have one or the other species of alien fish. So just talking about aquarium trade. So this is one of the most important pathways, one of the most important triggers for alien species invasion. So although the government of India has a document that says how many species of fish are allowed to be imported into India. So that gives us a number of 115, 116 species. But if you see, more than 1,000 exotic species are right now found in the country. And then the sources. So fish gets into these natural water bodies from aquarium stores, from breeding centers, from home aquaria, from garden pools, all of that. And there are two or three main challenges we have. One is people keep fish that grow to very large sizes. So in the aquarium literature, they are known as tank busters. And because of a lack of space in the aquarium, what happens is you grow them for a year or two, and then when they grow large for your aquarium, you then dump it into the nearest natural water body. Then there are also fish that breed extensively. So you bring in 10 fish, within a few months that becomes 100, then your aquarium can no longer hold those fish. What you do with them, you have to throw them somewhere. So these are the two big challenges that we have for the aquarium trade industry. And then there's also this problem of aquarium hobbyists always wanting to have new species. So they sort of get bored after a few years keeping a certain species, so they import a new species after a few years. And then there's a lot of cryptic online trade that happens with all these very interesting fish from the African rivers, from Amazon, etc. So these are a list of ornamental fish that have entered the country, found in natural water bodies, but not all of them have turned invasive. So you have 4 eyes there on the invasive status, number 13, 14, 15, and 16. So they are the Amazonian sucker catfishes, which have turned invasive. The other species are all found in natural water bodies, but not really at a level of an invasive species. Now the problem with food fish. So the problem with food fish is that alien species have always been the mainstay of our fish food industry. So right from the British times through the independence and also for the last several years, whatever fish that we get in the markets, especially in areas where we don't really have enough freshwater bodies, are all exotic fish. So they are either Chinese carps, fish from Vietnam, fish from Africa, all of that. So we always had a history of having food fish imported from outside the country. And then they are cheaper and easily available than native food fish. So there's always a demand, there's always a market for these organisms. There's a lot of illegal trade, very poor enforcement. So there's very little enforcement as far as invasive fish species are concerned in the country. And then there's another problem. So for example, there's a particular species of fish that came in from the Amazon a few years ago. And now it's naturalized throughout the country. And the government has now approved its aquaculture. So that happens. So when you have a fish that is brought in from outside, it's there for 5 or 6 years in the country, and then there's no way of eradicating it. Then the government issues a notice saying, no, you're legally allowed to farm this fish. So that's an example of that as well. Yeah, so this is the fish, the red-bellied paku, which is now all over the place in southern India, and the government of India has now legalized this fish to be cultured in open waters. Now there's also this problem. So the one on the top is a marine fish, which fetches you a very high price, and then the fish below is this fish, the paku. So they look alike when the skin goes off and when they are filleted. And then this is what happens when a lot of foreigners visit Kerala, for example. So they are mislabeled and given as a black pomfret, which is a very expensive marine fish, and it's very difficult to find them apart once they are completely skinned and filleted. Same thing happens with, so there's a fish on the left is the Kerala state fish, which is called the pearl spot, and the one on the right are tilapias. Again, very similar looking fish, and once they are filleted, they look alike. So you have these problems as well with alien fish entering into the markets. The other issue is with human health. We have a lot of problems with malaria, dengue, etc. And so there's this fish or 2 species of fish that have been introduced for malaria control. So one is the guppy and the other one is what is known as a mosquito fish. So both of them are among the list of world's 100 worst invasive fish species, but lots of places where they still keep introducing these fish. The government keeps introducing these fish into the wild for the purpose of mosquito control. Now, there are lots of studies that have shown, experimental studies that have shown that these fish really do not like mosquitoes. So, when you're given different kinds of food, there's no preference for mosquitoes. So it's a design, flaw where people think that these fish keep eating mosquitoes. So lots of studies in the literature. If you look at if gambusia or the mosquito fish is really an important feeder of mosquito larvae. So all of this is not backed up by real science. And then you have this problem with trouts. So these were fish that were introduced during the British times, mainly for sport fishing in different high altitude lakes of the country, right from Western Ghats to Kashmir and Northeast and everywhere. And even now, we keep introducing rainbow trouts into various natural water bodies. So even in places like the Nilgiris in the Western Ghats, which is one of the most richest hotspots of freshwater, endemic freshwater fish diversity, There are still government-backed programs to introduce rainbow trout and brown trout and all of that into the natural water bodies. So every state in the country, from Himachal, Sikkim, all of that are giving a lot of focus on developing rainbow trout and brown trout farms. And there's also a lot of misinformation in the literature. So there are several papers that have been published. I've purposefully taken out the author's name from these publications. So if you just look at the highlighted portions there, you will understand the level of knowledge that even fish scientists in the country have. So they're talking about trouts being endangered. They're talking about trouts needing conservation action. They're talking about trouts, needing a lot of government support, development, all of that. Also promoting the introduction of trouts. So all of them. So the ones in the one in the middle and the one below are in Current Science. The other one is in another reputed journal. So the amount of misinformation that is being spread in the literature is also a cause of concern. And then you have this issue there where politicians are all very interested in stocking or releasing fish into the wild without really understanding what fish goes into these rivers. So it's always 90% of the times it is always non-native species that are being introduced. So we really don't have a breeding technology, a mass-scale breeding technology for native Indian fish. So almost 90%, as I said, is all non-native species that are being introduced into different water bodies of the country. You also have a problem with these reservoirs and dams. So when you have a hydropower dam being built as a biodiversity offset, you're always asked to come up with a hatchery very close to the dam or the reservoir. So the idea is to sort of offset for the native species that are being lost due to the dam construction at this particular site. But what happens is, since there's no breeding technology available for any of these native fish that were found in these rivers, you always have Chinese carps or tilapias and all of those exotic fish being stocked in these farms and released into the rivers. So there you have an issue with one threat, which is the hydropower dam, and then an additional threat from the exotic fish that are being introduced into these systems. So if you go to many reservoirs in Kerala, the only fish that is left in these reservoirs is the African catfish. So this reservoir is up in the highlands in Kerala, where there were 20-odd species 20, 30 years ago, and now the only species that you get from these reservoirs is the African catfish. So it's like the last man standing in all our reservoirs. So it's just not open access areas. Even inside protected areas, you have a lot of problems with invasive species. So these are protected areas right from Rajasthan to Kerala, where you have African catfish being very rampant in the lakes, wetlands, rivers of this region. And it's very hard to get rid of them once they come into the system. So for example, I'm sure many of you know about the Periyar Tiger Reserve, which is one of the highly protected tiger reserve national parks in Kerala, which is known for its tiger conservation efforts. But not many people know that there are 8 point endemic fish in the Periyar Tiger Reserve. So point endemic fish are fish that are found nowhere else in the world except in that particular tiger reserve. And you have 4 alien species there, including the African catfish. So you don't know what the future is for these 8 very narrow endemic species that are only found in that system. So you have tilapia, you have African catfish, you have common carps, all of them world's worst 100 invasive fish, together with these very narrowly distributed 8 point endemic species. Now this is a very interesting case study. So we've always revered fish as part of a religious or spiritual cultural entity. But now you have people not knowing the importance there, and this is from a temple pool in Kerala where they are worshipping the African catfish. So that's a complete sort of paradox where they really don't know what kind of fish are being protected or being conserved, because this is from the Sringeri in Karnataka, which is a big temple sanctuary where they protect native fish. So that's the real part of it, and the ones on the right are temple pools in Kerala where it's full of African catfish, but they still feed them as part of a religious or cultural belief. So the state of knowledge on freshwater biology or freshwater invasion biology is very infant, at a very infant stage in India. So we don't really have a lot of studies that have looked at the impacts of freshwater invasions. So it's just mapping and looking at what diet overlap, and all of these very basic sort of studies. So we don't have a lot of in-depth or detailed information on the impacts. So that's one big knowledge gap that we still need to fill. We don't really have an audit on what fish comes in, what fish are found in the breeding centers, so there's absolutely no information. So if you go to any sort of store or any breeding center or any farm, you have no idea what sort of fish are there. So there's no audit from the part of state government or the central government. All of these fish are illegal fish that are not allowed to be brought into the country. The one on the right is also a CITES listed fish. So that's another conservation issue there. But they're all easily available. They're all marketed on YouTube and any social media channels. You have lots of photographs, videos of people openly selling them, all these illegal fish. Also, other strange fish from the Amazon, from Africa, that are being brought into the country and also being sold on online websites, where you can easily get stingrays, for example, from the Amazon, or the banjo catfish from the red-tailed catfish from Amazon. So all of these are illegal fish, but it's very easy to get them in any part of the country. Then there's also an ethical issue here. So the Periyar Tiger Reserve conducts this program of mass removal or mass culling of African catfish. So it happens every year or every 2 years. But there was an instance when we were doing this program in the Periyar, when there were people from the ethical side of things coming and stopping the event and asking us what you're going to do with the fish. And how is it possible to kill 500 or 1,000 fish? So they don't really understand what an invasive fish is and what a native fish is. So there is also this ethical consideration of what you can do with, say 1,000 fish or 2,000 fish that are being caught. So our original idea was to burn them, because you should not provide a negative incentive by giving it to someone and asking them to farm or make them into a value-added product or anything. So I think it all comes down to changing human behavior, especially when you look at aquarium trade or aquarium industry, because it's basically the people who are responsible for not throwing away their fish into the wild. So there has to be some holding facilities or some areas where you can actually give your fish away when you are tired of them, or when you think that your aquarium does not suit them or fit them. But that is also not available in the country so far. So the easiest thing to do is to dump your fish in the nearest water bodies. So this is a photo that I took from a moving train inside a washroom in a train in the UK, where they have lots of very interesting notices, public notices on not to flush your goldfish into the your washroom, your toilets, because that's one place where most people flush their fish, especially in the Western world. So I think we also need a lot of strategic communication, or we should develop a communication strategy for dealing with alien species in the country. The media has played a big role. So there's lots of media interest nowadays on aquatic invasions, on freshwater invasions, all of that. So all of that is happening. So people are still, they are aware of the risks. They are aware of the problems created by alien species, but since we can't give them a solution on what to do with their big fish once they grow big, or a fish which has excessive breeding habits. So unless as scientists and practitioners, we do not have a good solution to give them, so they will always end up throwing their fish. So we always also have lots of novel approaches in trying to understand alien species invasions in the country. So we've started to work on environmental DNA together with scientists from the CCMB in Hyderabad, trying to map where invasive species are using environmental DNA approaches. So that's one thing that happens. There are also a lot of interest in, for example, in Chennai, where IT professionals have all ganged up together to remove alien species from these lakes. So Chennai is one of the cities where you have lots of invasive species in their city lakes, because Chennai is a hub for ornamental fish trade. And most of these fish either escape into the wild or they are thrown into these lakes. So there's also a group of people who are now very keen to make sure that their lakes are free from alien species. So I think we need more of these kind of people and approaches in many cities of the country. So this is another stakeholder group. There's a lot of interest in angling or sport fishing. So they can also give us a lot of information on, or we can take their help to understand where these alien species occur, because they keep fishing, day in and day out in different parts of the country. So for a mapping exercise, this would be a good stakeholder group that we can take the support of. So this is a project that we started but never reached anywhere, was to tie up with the bird photographers in understanding alien species, invasions in the country, because it's just not impossible to go to, the length and breadth of the country trying to understand where you get alien fish. But there's a lot of interest in bird photography, and all of these 4 photographs have alien species, being caught by these birds. And they also have point localities, so it's easy to map them if we engage with different stakeholder groups like sport fishers, which I showed you in the last slide, and bird photographers, for example. So I think we need to move away from our conventional approaches of trying to understand distribution by looking at these interesting ways in which you can do it. I think that we have also not used the power of the Wildlife Protection Act, because it says the central government has the authority to seize and dispose invasive species. But I don't see much of efforts in this direction through the Indian Wildlife Protection Act to actually control and manage invasive fish. I'm not sure if that is happening for other groups, but at least from the fish side of things, I'm sure that this act has not really been used in the right way it can be to manage invasive species. So this eradication is successful. So for example, this is something that I got a few weeks ago from Australia, but as you can see, it is not an easy thing to do. So this was achieved after 28 years of eradication. So that's the time that you take for actually eradicating an invasive species out of your system. So it's not an easy task. It's not an economical task. So once you have a species in your system, it's extremely difficult to get rid of that. So as Dr. Shankaran was saying in the morning, so prevention is definitely the best way out, because once you have the fish, it's just impossible to get them out of the system. So I think there's some bright spots. This was 2 weeks ago when the National Green Tribunal has issued a notice to the center for the first time ever on invasive fish species. So this was based on a case filed at the National Green Tribunal, asking them to intervene and stop the different state governments to release mosquito fish in the country. So they've given a notice to the central government, to the Ministry of Fisheries, and different other state governments, asking them the reason why this is being done and what are the impacts. So I think this is a good starting point. People have now realized that you can even approach this from a legal point of view, which I don't think has ever been done, at least from the fish side of things. So I think with that, I'll stop. So let's hope we have our rivers without alien species in the future. Thank you very much.